I was born Joseph DiGeronimo on December 4th, 1922, in Newark, New Jersey. In 1930, my family moved to East Harlem in New York City, a predominantly Italian section. We were in the middle of America's worst depression, but I still had a great childhood. My friends and I played street games, especially stickball, street baseball played with a broomstick and a rubber ball. When windows got broken, we all chipped in for the 25 cents for a small, 50 cents for a large one. Sometimes someone would call the police, but as soon as they left, the word was, batter up. When I was 12 years old and 110 pounds, I decided to join the boxing team at the Boys Club on 111th Street. I won my first fight because my opponent was a no-show, but somehow my mother found out. When I got home, she rolled up her sleeves and said, "You want to fight? You fight me." She gave me a few good raps and I got the message. To this day, I have a boxing record that's never been equaled. 1 win and 1 loss without throwing a punch. After I graduated from Benjamin Franklin High School in June 1940, I worked as an office boy, multigraph operator, and baker for Silver Cup, Wonder, and Bond Bread. When Pearl Harbor was bombed, we were hanging out in Nichols Candy Store. Most of us had never heard of Pearl Harbor, and no one knew where it was. By February 1943, some of us wanted to enlist in the Army, but we knew it would be hard on our parents. So we went to the neighborhood draft board and had our cards pulled up early to March 15 from May 15. When I left, it was the first time I ever saw my mother cry. We went to Fort Dix, and then I was shipped to Camp Gordon, Georgia for basic training with the 281st Engineer Combat Battalion. After a few months, I was a bug sergeant and assigned to train new recruits. In 1944, I was sent to train the 283rd Engineer Combat Battalion. After 8 months, the unit was alerted to go overseas for combat. I was held back as part of the training cadre. My best buddy, Paul Curry, went over with the 283rd and was killed. I was best man at his wedding. That really hurt. I finally shipped out on June 28, 1945 from San Francisco on a crowded troop ship in a large convoy. After some mechanical problems and a submarine scare, we finally arrived in Manila in July 1945. We disembarked in convoy through Manila, which was a pile of rubble. The stench was awful. We camped about 5 miles from Manila, not far from Clark Field, close to the jungle. As engineers, our main job was to repair and maintain captured bridges. We also put out brush fires and repaired roads. It was dangerous work in hot and muggy weather. Many men were treated for malaria. I had dengue fever for 5 days. We saw how cruel the Japanese were. They were brutal to the Filipinos and murdered 70% of their prisoners. We vowed never to surrender for any reason. I saw so much death. It has always stayed with me. By August, we were training for the invasion of Japan. Our mission was to go in towards the shore and deactivate the horn mine, which the Japanese had placed about 2 to 3 feet underwater to take out the landing craft. It would have been a suicide mission. And then in August, President Truman dropped the atom bomb on Hiroshima. We celebrated like it was the biggest 4th of July ever, shooting our guns, laughing, dancing, and even crying for joy. But it turned out we still had lots of work ahead of us. Thousands of Japanese were hiding in the mountain, and it took weeks and months before they could get the word it was okay to surrender to the Americans. They were concerned that we'd get the same treatment they gave us. When they did come in, they were sick, tattered, and starving. We fed them good, checked their health, and assigned them to their quarters where they had their own cot. They could never believe the humane treatment they got. We also worked for months fixing roads and bridges to help the country get back on its feet. We had many fatal accidents. One of our trucks went over the side of the road and caught fire. The heat was so intense we couldn't get near it to save the driver. On another occasion, 2 men were coming in at night, and their truck went over the bridge. I was called at 3 o'clock in the morning to pick up the body of the soldier that drowned. I'll never be able to forget these things. Finally, on February 1946, we arrived in San Francisco in the good old USA. I knelt down and kissed the beautiful American soil. After I left the service, I worked for 50 years as head waiter in several predominant Italian restaurants in New York City. I was fortunate. I loved my work and liked my job. Although I had made it home safely, I continued to see and live with the effects of the war years later. Many of the men who had malaria had recurrences every few years. And in my neighborhood, we would often see men walking alone, talking to themselves. There were ex-GIs who had shell shock or battle fatigue, now known as post-traumatic stress disorder. They ate lots of junk food and hardly spoke to anyone and didn't care for themselves at all. They were loners, and you never saw them without a cigarette. Make them some hot soup and lots of rest, and they'll get over it, was the doctor's recipe. But most died young from sickness. I even knew some who committed suicide. There were men like this in every community in the country after World War II. You just don't hear about it. I only started to address my own PTSD about 8 years ago when I joined a World War II post-traumatic stress disorder group. I now play an active role in the program, helping others cope. I am part of a fading generation. World War II veterans are leaving us at a rate of 2,000 a day. But before I go, I want to do my part to make sure that we not only remember those who didn't come home, but that we make sure that veterans from all eras, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, and now Iraq and Afghanistan, get the care they need and deserve. We need to look after those who leave a part of themselves on the battlefield.